Alright guys, today we're gonna be reacting to how to do a German accent by a German native. Feli from Germany. Shout out to Felicia, great content creator. One of the best when it comes down to Americans and also German kinda content creator. She's very good. Oh my god, she when it comes down to content creation, I mean she's on top level. I love her content. And also she can give that perspective of, living in the United States for quite some times. It's very good to connect some of the dots and some of the missing parts. We're gonna react to this video. This might just help a little bit to my Duolingo. We're doing very well. Right now we are, let me just show you here. We are in almost finishing the part when it comes down to say where you're from. And this is the last little section of test, and then we're gonna move to talk about work. Been working for quite some time, and let me see how many lessons. One, I mean not lessons, but like sections. One, two, three, four, five. It's gonna be a sixth one. Took some time. Took some time, and it's very good because it just keeps you right on your toes. So you need to learn languages. Duolingo. It's not a sponsorship video. Not a lot of stuff. Make sure you like to subscribe. Also Discord, links in the description. Hey, thank you so much for the super chat. You guys are really helping me with the channel. I really appreciate it. Danke. Let's jump in. Let's see what's going on. For almost 10 years, man. Oh, good for her. Good for her. Shout out to Felicia, man. She's really coming along.
Movies and TV shows with German characters that, spoiler alert, in a lot of cases speak terrible German, or even their German accent when speaking English is obviously fake. And I asked you guys if you'd want me to make a video about how to do a real German accent, and I got a lot of comments saying that you'd love to see that, so here it is. Now, I've been living in the US for over 4 years now, and my American friends love making
4 years. When this video was uploaded? Oh, 2 years ago. Really? My mind is correct here. 4 years, but 2016. That'll be 2020. So that make whatever.
fun of Germans around me by doing a German accent, and they all sound something like this for some reason.
Oh, yes. That is wunderbar. I will go ski in the Alps today and eat some schnitzel.
Don't get me wrong, it definitely sounds funny, but it doesn't necessarily sound like a particularly German accent
It does not
to me.
sound.
And
it does not sound German at all. And a scale of 1 to 10, like a 2. 10 being very German, 2 being like a disgustingly not German. It sounds almost like a 1. Now that I think about it.
I don't really understand why a lot of people do this thing where they kind of try to sound extra feminine in order to sound German. So let's go through a few different things that you should pay attention to when trying to do a real German accent.
Let's see.
So that you can either sound like cis, or you can also have a lighter German accent like this. Now we're going to focus on having a German accent while speaking English, but this will actually also help you with your German accent when speaking German as a second language, because it all goes back to Germans applying pronunciation patterns from their native language to the foreign language. And when you're aware of these patterns and pronunciation rules, you can actually sound more like a native when speaking German as well. A lot of these things go back to sounds that exist in the English language but don't in German, and therefore people who grow up speaking German as their native language oftentimes struggle making these sounds. And one of those sounds is the English TH. Many Germans can't really pronounce that, and instead will either replace the TH with an S or Z sound, as in "This is the best weather of the year," or with a D sound, as in "This is the best weather of the year," instead of
it's like a S and a T mixed up together. The TH is basically like a S and a T mixed up together. But right there, in that little transition, right there.
this is the best weather of the year. When I want to imitate a really strong German accent, I usually do the first one though. Another sound that we don't have in German is the English W sound, the
Wow.
woo, where you really don't even touch anything with your lips or teeth. And this one is definitely easier to learn than the TH, but many Germans still struggle with it, and therefore just use the German W sound, which is the same
Isn't that
as the
crazy?
English V.
You have it in what? You have it in Spanish, Castilian, right? You have it in English, right? Now that I think about it. Hold up. We do use Wanda. Yes, we use the W. Yes. Spanish, right? If you're a Spanish speaker, we do use the W, but it's not very well known. They still use it. Like a name like Wanda is a very well known name in Spanish speaking countries. But no, that's English. Man, W is not used that often in Spanish. Now that I'm thinking about it, whoa, hold up. I'm getting red pill right now. What the hell? Let me see. Is the letter W used in Spanish? Okay. The letter W called W. Stand out from the rest of the Spanish letter. Spanish words using W. Man, Google sometimes doesn't help at all. Yeah, Spanish has borrowed that W because it doesn't really translate correctly now that I'm thinking about it. But I'm really Spanish using W words. Words in W. My bad, folks. I'm just. Man, they're really wow. Wow, there's almost none. Spanish using words W, whatever. See, W is only used for words from other languages. That is a good. See, place names such as Washington, Wyoming, Windhoek, Grosha. Wow. Wanda is a Spanish name. Wow, man. That's crazy, man. Water polo, western, whiskey. See, but these names, these words are basically just words from other languages. You're not really bungalow, kiwi. Kiwi's a new sandwich. But that's anglicism. That's just basically you borrowing a word from another. Taekwondo, exercise. No, that's not. Water polo, western, whiskey, windsurf, walk. Man, that's crazy. VW, the W or the W. That's crazy. Man, I'm my bad, folks. I just got here like, man, we don't use W. I only use W because I know how to speak English. However, never made the comparison why I don't use W in Spanish. The only the only word that I know in Spanish that I use W is basically Wanda. That's crazy, man. My bad, folks.
V sound, so it's V. So if you want to do a strong German accent, you can say things like "What a wonderful day with amazing Wetter" instead of "What a wonderful day with amazing weather." Now, some Germans are totally capable of pronouncing the English W, But they falsely
Wow,
assume
wow.
that in order to sound more English and less German, they should avoid the German V sound at all times, and they don't realize that the English V is pronounced V as well. So then it oftentimes happens that Germans will
Oh,
pronounce
true.
both W's and V's as the English W, woo. So they would say the volume of the TV is very loud instead of the volume of the TV is very loud. I hear this a lot with the word very, so to all Germans
volume?
watching this, don't be afraid of the V sound. It does exist in English as well, you just need to know when. W
yeah.
is woo, as in where, and V is V, as in very. Another tricky one is the English R. The German R is pronounced like this, R, which of course is really hard to make for everyone who learns German as a
You know what's crazy? Puerto Ricans sometimes they use that kind of sound when it comes down to double R's. Pejo, pejo, was it dog? Perro, arroz, ajo, which is arroz, which is rice. I don't know where's that coming from. Some people say it's Canarians and all regions close to France, they came to the island, right? And they just dump all that stuff here because Puerto Rico has a lot of. For all you folks don't understand, don't know, Puerto Rico has a lot of European descent, a lot of it. I think our culture is what 70% European. It's crazy, and a lot of the Spanish that we speak is kind of funny. The pejo, the cajo, the jo. It's kind of funny because it's a double R from here, right? It's from the throat. It's very similar to the German pronunciation of the R. I don't know. I found that very interesting, and it's interesting that a lot of Puerto Ricans, especially in the countryside, they will still use it. Ajo, pejo. It's funny.
second language. But believe it or not, to us, the English R sound can be tricky too, especially for people who learn English later in life, which is why you'll sometimes hear German immigrants who came to the US decades ago still use the German R sound. So if you want to sound extra German, you can just pronounce all R's the German way if you can't pronounce that and say something like, "These are really great red roses," instead of "These are really great red roses." And
Hey, shout out to Felicia, man. She's bringing the fire here, man.
as you could hear, I didn't really pronounce the R in the word R at all, which is also something that Germans do in German a lot, especially when words end on R. It's kind of what you would do in a British accent too. Instead of car, Germans might say ka. Now, some Germans who can't
Ka.
pronounce the English R but can pronounce the W will then try to replace the R's with a W sound because they think it's the closest sound to an English R, and they'll say things like, "These are really great roses." This is also kind of like what native English-speaking
I
kids
see.
also do when they first learn how to speak, so it's kind of like
Yeah, they're trying to associate certain words, right, from what they already know. So it makes it kind of funny.
English baby
Sound,
language in
yeah.
a way. The next thing is that in German, we don't really make a difference between a D and a T at the end of words. I've mentioned this before in my false friends video. Germans usually pronounce a D at the end of a word as a T, whereas in English, that is a very big difference. So instead of brand, Germans will say brand. Instead of
Brand.
crooked, Germans will say crooked. Instead of the name Ted, Germans will say Ted. You get the idea. So if you do that with all of your D endings in English, you'll already sound a lot more German. You can do that with other word
Crooked.
endings too, by the way, so just pronounce them more.
So the way I think about it is when I see an ed at the end, I just let my tongue just touch the top of my palate. Crooked. See, crooked. Mentioned. See, mentioned. It's like a little subtle, like a subtle kind of touch on the top of my palate. See, and that way you just fall into it with ease. Crooked. See, it's very subtle. You don't crooked. You don't do that, right? Even though you say the, you know, just let your tongue touch the top of your palate.
Harshly than you usually would and devoice them. So instead of saying Germans, say Germans. Or instead of cars, say cars. Or if you apply the R
Damn.
rule as well, say Kas. This applies to other endings too, like a G ending. You can say dog instead of dog.
Well,
Now
that's
let's
the
talk about
open
vowel.
vowels rules, right? So the Germans are open vowels language, right? Open vowels means that they have the a, e, o, u, right? And then they have these transitional words like with the I, like and then they have the e, right? All these kind of words that are transitional with the little dots on the top. On top, I don't know how they call those, but Germans are very straightforward, like Spanish. I, E, O, U. So there's like a mix of a lot of these languages. They sort of like they know each other. Let's put it this way, because certain sentences from German, like uh, man, I cannot think about one. Um, New York is ein America, right? Is ein or is ein America? I think say New York is in America. But if you listen to it, I don't know. I'm saying this correctly, right? New York is ein America, right? If you're an English speaker, you can understand what he's saying. If you're a Spanish speaker, you will not understand what he's saying. But then when they talk about open vowels, you as a Spanish speaker, it's a great transition because you don't have to worry about a e I o u, all these weird muscles that you have in your tongue that might be a little bit harder for you to do the transition. Meaning, if you're a Spanish speaker, it's harder for you to go to English. You're a Spanish speaker, it might be a little easier for you to just go German. I'm telling you.
German vowels, like in most languages, just make one sound per vowel, one sound per letter.
Yep.
The German vowels are A, E, I, O, and U. Now,
See, that's what I told you. That's what I told you.
the reason why I'm putting so much emphasis on this is that even though you might not realize doing it, English vowels are actually diphthongs for the most part, meaning that for one vowel, you actually make two sounds. So you move your mouth while saying them.
Yep.
Like in A. See my mouth moving?
Yeah,
A.
A.
Then
E.
is pretty straight, like you don't
I.
move your mouth here. E. But then you have I, O,
O,
and U. So in order to sound more German, you'll need to pronounce your vowels more like just one letter, just one sound. Straighter, as I like to describe it. We do use the word okay a lot in German, for example, but instead of saying okay like in English, we tend to say something like okay or okay. Or you'd say hello instead of hello, or Paper instead of paper. Germans also tend to pronounce their vowels pretty short, like saying cat instead of cat, and they might replace some of them with the German sound, like say end instead of and. We just use the German E sound instead of an English A. Or Germans might say ambition instead of ambition. And just use the German A instead of the English A. My last major pronunciation tip in order to imitate a German accent is about the L sound. Now in English there are two different L sounds, a dark L that is pronounced more in the back of your throat, L, and a light L that is more pronounced with the tip of your tongue. As in telephone. Yeah. In German, we don't have the dark L at all, so if you just replace all dark L sounds with a light L, you'll sound a lot more German very quickly. So instead of saying,
you know what's
I
crazy?
need to call...
You know what's crazy? I'm learning a lot from her, man. She's very good. I'm learning a lot from her. The fact that she's just going through these kind of sounds, she's giving me some tips to learn, Duolingo in German. Because even though you have in Duolingo, you're basically taking some tests and just going through some exercises. You're just winging it, right? So I know at the end it's gonna make sense. So I'm not worried about that. But these kind of tips do really help.
All of my middle school Latin students, you'd say I need to call all of my middle school Latin students. Now that was with only the L part of the accent. If I do the whole accent on the sentence, it would sound like this. I need to call all of my middle school Latin students. And last but not least, let's talk about grammatical mistakes that Germans tend to make in English, because it's not just the pronunciation that makes an accent authentic, it's also the way that people phrase
Phrase
things.
it, yeah.
I actually made a whole video about mistakes that Germans should avoid when speaking English. I'll link that down below. So basically, if you just go through that and then make all of these mistakes that I told people to avoid, you will sound pretty German. One thing I mentioned in there is that Germans can't really tell the difference between the word since and for, as in I've lived here since 2016
Oh, I see.
versus I've been living here for 4 years.
I see what she's saying. I see what she's saying. Yeah, it's two ways to say the same sentence, basically.
Tend to always use since. Another thing is that English has some uncountable nouns that we don't have in German, and therefore Germans tend to use plural forms of these nouns that don't actually exist in English. An example would be the word information, for example, or also the word hair. Germans might say, I need some more informations, or I'm getting my hairs cut. What I didn't mention in that video is that Germans tend to use the verb to make in contexts where you wouldn't really use it in English.
So you know what's funny? A lot of you guys were telling me, "Oh, Pablo, why you're using an S at the end of the supermarket name Aldi's?" Because Aldi's supermarket, because it's Aldi's, it's the supermarket of Aldi's. That's why I add the S at the end. If you don't add, if you only add the S, it's just already how can I say this? When you add the S, I'm just assuming that you already know that I'm talking about Aldi's supermarket, right? So that's why we say Aldi's, right? We don't say Aldi supermarket. We say Aldi's, which is the supermarket of Aldi. So supermarket of Aldi. So every time that you have like a something of something, you add that S, right? Pablo's restaurant. See? Pablo's bar or Pablo's. You don't have to put bar, right? Because it's already assumed that you know this is my bar. Yeah, that's why we say and I was checking some of the other videos, a lot of people, just to make sure I was not crazy. And yes, a lot of other Americans that was pronouncing it like that. Aldi's supermarket. Aldi's. Because it's already assumed or presumed that you know we're talking about the supermarket. That's why.
Use that word a lot, it'll help you sound more German too. Just say something like, I have to make a photo instead of take a photo. Or to make sport instead of to play sports or to exercise. Or I'm making vacation instead of I'm on vacation. Or making the apartment clean instead of cleaning up the apartment. In general, just replace the verb to do with to make every now and then, and you'll sound pretty German. Another thing that Germans struggle with are English time modes. We don't have a progressive form in German, for example, so I'm going instead of I go, and Germans actually tend to use the progressive form way too much and will say things like, I'm living in Germany instead of I live in Germany, or I'm going to the University of Cincinnati instead of I go to the University of Cincinnati, when they just mean to attend.
Yeah.
So overusing the progressive form is one thing, and then Germans also use the present tense a lot. For example, instead of using the present perfect progressive, as in I have been living here for 4 years, Germans might just say I live here for 4 years, or actually they would say I live here since 4 years. And we also like to use the present tense instead of the future tense, because that's also what we do in German. So instead of saying, I will go to the movies with you tomorrow, we'll just say, I go to the movies with you tomorrow.
Oh,
or
I see.
instead
I
of,
see.
I'm going.
I see. I go to. Yeah, it's like a very present tense. You have to. Yeah, you have to change it to future sense. She called it what, progressive? I'm not good when it comes down to grammatics and stuff like that. That's something that I really lacked. I'm gonna be honest. My education when it comes down to languages was not the best. Let's put it that way. It's something that I've been trying to work on to the last couple of years, and I've been getting better, of course. But in the meantime, just noticing those little details does help to understand your own language. And hopefully in the future I can just, eliminate some of those mistakes. But I know what she's talking about, because when I moved to the mainland back in 2012, I used to talk like that. I go to the theater. Instead of saying I'm going to the theater, I used to talk like that. That was no, I remember those days, man. Whoa, that was rough. That was rough, man. But the thing is, because I already knew English, by this by the year I was just already speaking the language fluently. But a lot of mistakes, of course. A lot of my accent was just kind of trumped the the flow of the sentences, because the way I used to speak Spanish was very different. And of course, that being my base language, there was a lot of holes, right? A lot of holes. And when you learn a new language, you bring those holes with it. That's the thing. Like, even though you're learning these languages, right? You have to make sure that your base language, or it's right on, it's right on top shape. Because what happens is, if you don't have your base language on top shape, all of a sudden you start speaking, Spanish with English and German and Italian all together, and then you have a soup. You're speaking soup. That's my
Going
opinion.
to apply for that job next week, Germans might say, I apply for that job next week. And last but not least, Germans oftentimes make statements and then turn it into a question by adding the word oder, meaning or at the end. You can do that in English too, but you'd probably add something like right, as in, you're in 5th grade now, right? Or you're in 5th grade now, aren't you? If you want to sound German though, just add the word or to the end of your sentence and say, you're in 5th grade now, or? The last point that's probably pretty important to know
That
is
makes
how
no sense. I'm just hearing that. I'm like, what the hell was that? Doesn't even make sense.
to pronounce the word German or Germany with a German accent. If you want to do it really strongly, you can say German or Germany. German, Germany.
German?
We basically
German?
pronounce it with the O umlaut letter, which
Yeah,
probably
exactly.
doesn't help you a lot, but just try and say
Those
German.
are little,
Also,
the
Germans
little I call it the transitional vowels. I don't know if that's how you call it. Transitional meaning like they go from one sound to the other, but that during that transition, that's when you to pronounce those little thingies. I don't know how you call those vowels.
tend to pronounce every single letter that's written down, so don't try to drop any word endings. That's not going to sound particularly German. And in German, we usually emphasize the first syllable of each word, unlike in French, for example, where they emphasize the last syllable usually. I think with these tips, you should be able to do a pretty decent German accent, maybe sounding something like this. And as I've said throughout the video, you can also do different degrees of a German accent simply by either applying all of these points all at once, or only applying a few of them, or by making some of the more advanced pronunciation mistakes. If you have something to add, please feel free to do so in the comments below. I'm sure there's a lot that I didn't even think about for this video, but I hope it was helpful for adapting a German accent while speaking English, but also for those of you who are trying to work on their German accent when speaking German
Yeah,
as a
she
second
helped.
language.
She's helping
If you
a
want to
lot.
hear an American who learned German in 10th grade and totally mastered the German accent and actually now sounds like a native speaker, you should check out the videos with my friend Josh or check out our podcast that we host together. You can find all the links down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and as you guys know, you can support my channel on Patreon and buymeacoffee.com. And for more content, just follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. If you want to see more of my videos on language and pronunciation, just click.
Man, she's a very lovely lady, man. Shout out to her. She does a very good job. She got that German culture thing going on, man. She's so nice, man. A very, very well put together. Very well put together. Love her content. Very good. Yeah, she clearly just give very good tips, making sure that, I pay a little bit more attention on those differences between the L's, right? Because in English, it's true. You have that light L at the end, la 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 la, and then you have the kind of sound on the back, right? If it's a double L, you have to make it a little bit heavier. So that's gonna be very important to pay attention. You don't want to sound German with a twang to it. You know what I'm saying? Ich bin Hollandaise. You don't want to sound like a twang. You want to make sure that you can just catch as much essence from the language. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I would love to hear you guys' opinion. I will see you in the next one.